explain what it is we're trying to accomplish here in Ohio with the RLCOH is to explain my experience last month at the National Convention for the Republican Liberty Caucus. It was in Nashville, New Hampshire. It's the most successful national convention they've had to date, due in no small part to some wonderful speakers, two of which were Senators Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. And I mentioned them in particular because they happen to be number 1 and 2 in the straw poll voting that took place. So if that gives you an idea, as you're getting acclimated to what the RLC is all about, what their values are about, they were 1, 2, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz in the straw poll voting. Wonderful speeches that they gave as they give every time they speak. But there was a wonderful presentation also in Keynote that I want to highlight for you. There was a conversation in Keynote around the liberty movement in general. And it started off with the very simple statement that we are winning. It was a positive message, because all too often we hear negative messages about how we're being beat up as a liberty movement. It was a wonderful positive message that we are winning. Don't know that I exactly buy it at the beginning of the speech, but we are winning. And they gave evidence to that effect. And they gave evidence to that effect by speaking about this wonderful coalition. I love this phrase. They called it the Leave Us Alone Coalition. And what they said was, we are successful as a liberty movement when we see a successful coalition building, namely this Leave Us Alone Coalition. Now, if you wonder what the heck does that mean, picture, if you will, sitting in Southwest Ohio, an anti-Common Core education freedom mother. That's been her mission in life, is to bring more local control to government, parental control, and free our teachers to be able to do what's right for our students. That's her mission in life. Now picture, if you will, sitting in Central Ohio, a pro-Second Amendment man, young man, not married, no family, maybe has no plans to have any kids. Doesn't really think about the education movement much. But that pro-2A man realizes that in order to be successful in what he wants to do, he needs to have the back of that anti-Common Core mom. And that anti-Common Core mom, who's fighting for education rights in Southwest Ohio, may not own a gun. May not really think too much about gun rights, and it's not her cup of tea. But she understands that in order to further liberty, the way she sees needs to be done for herself and her children, that she's got the back of anyone who espouses gun rights. Now add to that the taxed and up already crowded liberty groups across the state, small business owners who are fearing oppressive regulation and how it's creeping into our everyday lives, civil libertarians. As you grow this group, this Leave Us Alone coalition becomes a formidable force. So, when they started with We Are Winning, they more importantly said the way we continue to win is to grow this Leave Us Alone coalition. So my question of you today, before we get into the heart of today's agenda, and more importantly, football, are you part of the Leave Us Alone coalition? Not for its own sake, because we're selfish, and because we want it all me, but we understand that morally, it's the only way to run a society. We understand that if we want the economic and moral well-being of a society, it needs to be organized around liberty. And because of that, we've got each other's back. If you want to be part of that coalition, we hope that you will join us at the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio, and we're going to give you even more reasons to want to do that here in just a moment. So, today's agenda. We're going to start with some very quick speeches, 5-minute speeches, because again, I promised that we hadn't done with the tour of the program by the top of the next hour. Some individuals who know far better than I do what it takes to further liberty in the state of Ohio. Then we're going to introduce those tools that I talked about earlier, the Ohio Legislative Liberty Index and the Ohio Candidate Liberty Index. And I think you're going to be very impressed about what these are all about, and more importantly, understand the amount of work it's going to take to make them successful. And then lastly, we hope you'll stick around for some Q&A. If you're watching online, you'll be able to ask questions. Hopefully, you are at rlcoh.org, and not just on the main page, but if you actually go to the Events tab, where there's a whole page dedicated to today's event, you can not only watch it, but you'll have an opportunity to ask questions. And we'll also be able to ask questions here in Medina and Williams on the Lake. You're going to hear from some incredible folks here today that represent a very diverse set of opinions in the liberty movement, but together, we are the coalition that's going to be successful. So let's get started, what do you say? All right. Let's start, if we will, with Senator Chris Jordan. Senator Chris Jordan started his political career as a Delaware County County Commissioner, a state representative, and now has been a state senator from Central Ohio, Ostrander in Delaware County since 2011. He received the 100%, correct me if I'm wrong, 100% rating from the American Conservative Union, Chris, as well as the 2011 Ohio Farm Managers Association Legislator of the Year. This man is near the top of our Liberty Index when we crunch the scores, and it's by no surprise. Please join me in welcoming Senator Chris Jordan.
Want me up here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize we were going to be having an OSU kickoff at noon today, so I got my 2-hour drive home, so hopefully I'll be able to find the radio station that talks that has the OSU football game on it. But I figured this far north, there are probably more hockey fans. Aren't we pretty close to Canada? Anyhow, there's a lot of folks around our state over the last 5, 6, 7 years, and probably the only good thing that our president has done is he's awoken a lot of people. You know, he's made a lot of people aware how close we are, and you know how close we can become very quickly to losing our freedoms. And once we lose them, we're probably never going to get them back. Ronald Reagan said something very similar to that. And one of my favorite presidents, actually my very favorite president, Thomas Jefferson, said the natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and government to gain ground. And let's just say over the last 100 years, especially, government's gained a lot of ground. And I know in our Senate retreat, we all talked about introducing bills that would repeal laws and trying to pull back the reins on government, cut taxes, cut spending, because every dollar we spend makes us less free. And that's what I've done. There are several of my colleagues that have tried to do the same thing. I wish more would. My bills, I've had several protecting our Second Amendment rights, prohibiting the registration or confiscation of our firearms. I also introduced constitutional carry. I think the Second Amendment speaks for itself. I don't think we need to get a permit to go to church. We don't need a permit to freely assemble. I also don't believe we need a permit to protect ourselves from the thieves in our neighborhood, nor the thieves in government. And I'm going to do in the near future, do a non-compliance called federal gun laws. I'm working on that bill. I've introduced the repeal of Common Core. The first thing, when the guys in my office start out, I've had several of them over the last 2 or 3 years, I have them read the Bill of Rights, and I have them compare that with the Communist Manifesto. And plank number 10 of the Communist Manifesto is to have a central education system that can move the herd one direction or the other based on what the government wants them to think. That's why local control is so important in education, to allow the local values to be taught to our children. And ultimately, that control needs to go directly to the parents. And I believe in the school choice movement. I believe in local control and get Washington out of our education system. Authored the repeal of energy mandates. I'm for a free market. In a lot of different things. It produces cheaper widgets, produces cheaper energy, produces better children in our schools. And I don't think, people want solar and wind and all those other things, let them do it. But don't make me pay more for my electricity, don't make my neighbors pay more for their electricity because of those things. A couple other bills I'm working on, civil asset forfeiture. It doesn't happen all the time, doesn't even happen real regularly. But we just dropped a bill, and Senator Ophoff was instrumental in helping out on that one. Basically, puts the burden of proof back on the government. It's part of our justice system is that you're innocent until proven guilty, and you shouldn't. Civil asset forfeiture is where the government can take your stuff because it looks suspicious, and you shouldn't allow them to take your stuff based on a hunch. They should have to prove that you're guilty and prove that that had something to do with the crime before they can take your stuff. Period. Our founders, Samuel Adams, he had a quote that Americans have a right to 3 things. First, the right to life, then liberty, then property, the ability to protect all 3. And those 3 are connected, and our ability to defend ourselves allows us to have liberty and property and our life. Other two resolutions I'm working on is Audit the Fed. It's a banking cartel that has control of our monetary system. Very, very dangerous. They've created bubbles in the past. They're creating current ones right now. So get ready for the next bubble to burst because of what's happening in Washington and what's happening with our central bank, which is plank number 5 in Congress. And we see what happened on 9/11 and what's happening in Paris today. They're tragic events, horrible things that are happening, at the towers and overseas. James Madison said, if tyranny and oppression come to this land, it'll be under the guise of fighting foreign invaders. And just be very careful when there are tragedies that happen that people in government, like Hillary Clinton, don't try and, grab onto those tragedies to steal more of our freedoms. They created a number of spying programs that they're not after people in Afghanistan. They're not after people in Iraq. A lot of those are targeted towards normal Americans. And you have to be always on guard to protect your civil liberties, and to protect your rights, and to protect your wallets and your families. And if we don't do it, people in Columbus and people in Washington are not going to do it for us. Every politician, everyone who's elected, is always concerned about another election, or most of them. So you always have to send letters, call, contact, let them know that you're paying attention. And that kind of segues me into the Republican Liberty Caucus and the value of having an index and the value of showing legislators that there are eyes watching. There's two ways of doing it. There's either the carrot or the stick. And I think it's good to let them know that they're being watched, they're being judged on their votes, they're being watched, they're being judged on the bills that they introduce, and to let them know that the people that care about liberty, which I still think is a large amount of people, too many people are concerned with the Kardashians and other, stuff going on in life to really pay attention to what's going on in government, unfortunately. But, we need to let them know that there are eyes on them. And again, the stick or the carrot, that I'm not encouraging this to happen, but there are other groups that run primaries against people that are, not of their political persuasion. I think a lot of labor unions do those kind of things. There's a lot on the left that do those kind of things. But I would like to say that this index can be used for a good purpose, not just to scare people, but to let people know that these issues are important to their constituents, are important to their voters, and that we want you to be, proud of your score on the Liberty Index. We want you to be proud that you scored 98th percentile and you had, a dozen or 24 different bills that all protected our freedoms. And that, we're going to let our voters and our friends and our constituents know that you're the guy for us because you're for liberty. So, I guess I'm just going to let the next speaker speak, and I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. But I'll leave you with another Jefferson quote, one of my 3 favorite presidents, Jefferson, Madison, and Jackson. In matters of style, swim with the currents, and matter of principles, stand like a rock. And you need to stand strong in your principles. You'll also find in this one, in this index, and in a number of other rankings, it's tough to grade people because one of the challenges of being a Senate president or in leadership in the House or the Senate is trying to protect their members. And they do weed out a lot of really bad stuff. Our Senate president has weeded out a lot of very bad bills that our members or Democrat members have introduced. But another thing is that we do have members that are scared of, going too far out there on even some of the liberty stuff. So there's only a handful of bills that are probably being, judged and graded today. So it's really kind of tough to come up with a perfect representation based on that one. But I do think it's a very good start on figuring out who your liberty-minded legislators are, and it's a very good start in pointing people in the right direction, both the legislators and the voters who are looking at who to vote for. So, and again, we just need more legislators, candidates who who are willing to stand on their principles. So, God bless you. Thank you.
A couple other folks that I want to recognize here today. Hopefully you had an opportunity, if you've not in the past, to become affiliated or to at least become familiar with Americans for Prosperity that are represented here, so you can learn quite a bit about them. Also want to introduce John McAvoy. John is the leader of the Toledo Tea Party, and he is, more importantly today, for a lot of folks here, also helping to lead the effort with Ohio Conservatives United. And if you're not familiar with that, there is someone to talk to in John McAvoy. In addition, he put on your chairs a presidential straw poll. Here's what that's all about. Ohio Conservatives United is going around to liberty groups across the state, and we're very pleased that he's decided to poll our group here today as well, and is trying to figure out where is the heart of Ohio's conservatarians when it comes to who is going to, or who should be, our party's nominee, and then asking the question, because a splintered vote is one that will not serve any of us very well, would you be willing to change your vote to get behind a common candidate? And so he's been polling across the state. He can actually show you online, he's got set up over there, how that is taking shape, because he's been doing it for many months now across the state, how that's taking shape. And I think you might be surprised by some of the results with regards to people's willingness to get behind a common candidate. So you might want to see John McAvoy. Our next speaker, I'm very, very pleased to say, is actually on the board of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. Man, I couldn't be more pleased to have this kind of intellectual horsepower on our board. She is a stay-at-home mom. She's a former second-grade teacher, politically active as the head of the Cincinnati Tea Party, VP of Ohio Rising. She worked as the Butler County coordinator for the Ohio Healthcare Freedom Amendment and is on the Butler County Central Committee. What a wonderful perspective when it comes to educating those in Ohio's liberty movement. Please join me in welcoming Ann Becker.
Thank you all for coming today. I'm going to have some quotes to Chris Jordan that I picked all Republican presidents. Abraham Lincoln said that America will never be destroyed from the outside. If we falter and lose our freedoms, it will be because we destroyed ourselves. A few years ago, I had a meeting with then House Majority Leader John Boehner, my former congressman. I was with a group of liberty leaders in the 8th Congressional District. We call it the cheese and quiche meeting because they have really good snacks there. I had a minute with John after the meeting, and I asked him a question. Why are you making decisions that go against the founding values of our country? Why are we spending? Why are we compromising? He looked at me and said, I don't do the work I'm doing for you. I do it for the middle 20%. Your side will always vote for me. The Democrats will always vote against me. It's the people in the middle that decide elections. I need them on our side. It was all about winning elections. The idea of protecting the rights of Americans to serve, protect, and defend the Constitution, it was an afterthought. And that dynamic, it must change. That conversation changed the way I view politics forever. For our voice, the voice of principle to matter in electoral politics, there must be more of a consequence for not voting on principle. Republicans must be held accountable for what defines us being Republicans. The old ways no longer work. We must come together and stand for liberty inside of our own party. The mission of the Republican Liberty Caucus is to return the Republican Party to its ideological roots of limited government, free enterprise, and personal liberty. We will help to return the Republican Party to its roots in 3 ways: accountability, education, and engagement. We'll strengthen the Republican Party through accountability. The Liberty Caucus of Ohio expects politicians, if they call themselves Republicans, to take a principled stand on issues concerning limiting the size of government here in Ohio, encouraging free enterprise between people and businesses without government interference, and creating and eliminating laws that support liberty of the citizens of Ohio. Our Liberty Index will hold our politicians accountable. We'll strengthen strengthen the Republican Party through education. The expectation does not only apply to politicians. We have to help our fellow Ohio Republicans to be educated on the issues that face us. The Republican Liberty Caucus will become a trusted source of information about bills, laws being proposed by our government. We'll show you how your representatives vote on those laws and how they stand on the issues. We will share resources, issue papers, debates, candidate forums, all in the name of helping shape Ohio Republicans understand the issues that we face. There are several resources that are my personal favorites that we're going to help share with you. Maurice Thompson and his organization, the 1851 Center for Constitutional Law. This nonprofit, nonpartisan legal center is dedicated to protecting the constitutional rights of Ohioans. Matt Mayer and Opportunity Ohio. They're dedicated to enhancing prosperity of Ohioans through educating policymakers and citizens. Jason Hart, watchdog.org. If you're not following Jason Hart's work, we will share it with you. He is getting to the heart of the issues that are helping shape Ohio politics. And Ohio Rising, we're working to communicate with you all of the issues that face Ohioans. These organizations and the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio will work to educate and inform and Ohio all people that fall under the Republican umbrella. And finally, we'll strengthen the Republican Party through engagement. Part of the vision of the Republican Liberty Caucus, the national chapter and our own chapter, is working within our local Republican Party to invigorate and revitalize the GOP in our area, at home. We hope to do this through the precinct level through Central Committee. An organization in Ohio called the Ohio Precinct Project is working to rebuild the political parties. Over the past 30 years, all parties, I think, but in particular the Republican Party, has become neglected. Many involved do not have the principles as their main focus, and that much has changed. Just a little bit about Central Committee. It's the organizing structure of our party. They are the people who decide who is on the Republican Party slate card, who is the endorsed candidate. If we want candidates to be endorsed that stand for principle, then we need principled people on Central Committee who will give the party endorsements. The Ohio Republican Party is split up into our 88 Ohio counties. Each county has their own countywide GOP. They're split up into precincts. There's 9,160 precincts in Ohio. We need 5,000, 6,000 people in Ohio to run these Central Committee seats. 6,000 people out of 8 million Ohio voters. I think we can do it. I think we can. The filing deadline this year for your precinct level Central Committee seat and state Central Committee, which is 33 men and 33 women that run the actual Ohio Republican Party, the filing deadline is December 16th. 2/3 of the seats, Central Committee seats, are up this March. If you don't know who your Central Committeeman is, then it should be you if you're watching this video or here today. Call your Board of Elections, ask them if your Central Committee seat is up for re-election, and if it is, ask the Board of Elections how to get on the ballot and do it. Please visit www.ohioprecinctproject.com. There is a truckload of resources to help you do this. Ronald Reagan said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We won't let freedom become extinct on our watch. We're Republicans. We want the Republican Party to grow and stand in the principles of the Constitution. Join the Republican Liberty Caucus and help us achieve that. Thank you.
So I got a text message just a second ago saying, wow, what a wonderful picture. It's a decent sound, but you know, it could probably have a little bit more sound. To which I said, you're not going to need it for the next speaker. So trust me, you don't need to tinker with the sound at all. For our next speaker, we couldn't be more pleased to have with us today because we're in his backyard, and he similarly would be held accountable if he didn't show up today. Is a former Bainbridge Township trustee. He is served as a state representative, so he's a former Ohio legislator. He can speak from that perspective. And he's currently a congressional candidate for Ohio's 14th district, and wow, what a dynamic voice for liberty. Please join me in welcoming Matt Lynch. Good morning. What a privilege to be here with Chris and Ann and other Liberty leaders. And I'm so excited, Bill, about what you're doing here, because when I was in the Ohio House, there was no rating system for state legislators, and that would have been very helpful to me, actually. And I think helpful to the legislature in general, because it actually is the job of the citizens to bring, as Ronald Reagan said, bring the heat so that they will see the light. And that's what this kind of rating system can do. So my job this morning in 5 minutes is to say something about how we can win. And when I say we can win, of course I mean Republicans can win, but I mean how can conservatives win? I am frustrated often, as some members of the legislature here today will attest to, often when it seems to be that it's the Democratic wing of the Republican Party which is setting the agenda. And in order to prevent that from happening, we have to use the kinds of tools that the Liberty Caucus has suggested to actually bring that heat so they can see that light. But we are winning, in fact, and we're winning with the public. We've seen just in the past few weeks, the last election, some rather amazing results. And we saw down in Texas that no, the people actually did not want to change the way that the bathroom should be labeled so that any man could go to a woman's bathroom. And people were shocked at that, at least on the left and in the media. And we saw right here in Ohio that the wisdom of the Ohio voters said, no, we don't want to legalize another intoxicant, marijuana, and we're going to turn that down. And then finally, we saw in Kentucky a new governor who actually ran against Common Core and against Obamacare, and is a strong Christian conservative, and got elected overwhelmingly. What in the world is happening? And what is happening is that we're winning these arguments when we articulate these arguments. And that's where the dilemma is. We have to be willing to articulate the arguments. You know, when Ronald Reagan had his overwhelming presidential elections, they used to talk about the three-legged stool of conservatism that put him into office. And that stool still exists. And it begins with the security conservatives. And when we talk about security, and we saw this in the presidential debate recently, a lot of discussion about we have to increase the size of the military, put more money in the military, and certainly most Republicans and conservatives would agree with that. But it's not simply the military, it's also our borders. And we see how Donald Trump and others make a lot of hay. We need to have an articulate argument as to why it's important economically, as well as for security purposes, in order to actually secure our borders. It was interesting to see the French president immediately upon this horrible attack in Paris close the borders. And we need to close our borders, and we need to draw those security conservatives into the Republican Party to help us win. But we need the economic conservatives. How many of us don't constantly talk to anyone that will listen about the $20 trillion in debt, deficit spending, and the unfunded mandates that some say are over $100 trillion? How are we going to overcome them? Well, there are plenty of economic conservatives waiting over there at the Democratic Party for some Republican leader to actually articulate that problem in such a way that brings them to the Republican side. Ann talked about the candidate that says, well, I'm trying to do everything for that 20% in the middle. Well, you know, I don't think it's a good idea for Republicans to try to manipulate or deceive the 20% in the middle, to somehow push our conservative values in the background in order to persuade, perhaps for one election cycle, some voter in the middle to come over. No, I think we should actually articulate conservative values that bring those conservative Democrats, those that actually agree with our values, but fail to hear them well spoken, and bring them to the Republican side of the ballot, and have the kinds of victories that Ronald Reagan had, or
that Bevan just had in Kentucky. And that means we have to also include the social conservatives. How many of us have been to events or spoken to people and say, well, you know, it's okay to talk about the balanced budget problems, or it's okay to talk about it, but don't talk about those social values. Don't talk about marriage. Don't talk about life. If we don't articulate those values, we leave a significant portion of the Republican Party base and the conservatives in this country behind. And we cannot win elections without them. And those three legs of that stool, the security conservatives, the economic conservatives, the social conservatives, are essential. But today we are actually in a better position than Ronald Reagan was, because today we have the liberty conservatives. It was only 9 or 10 years ago that the first tax and alcohol ready days were held. The first Tea Parties came out, the 9/12 groups erupted, and now here in Ohio, the Ohio Republican Liberty Caucus. These liberty groups represent a fourth stool, a fourth leg of that stool, if you will, a fourth foundation on which Republican conservative victories can be built. And those are the liberty of the conservatives. And I love what Chris said, you know, but they've had enough already. You know, leave us alone already. That group that says, listen, we actually have to follow the Constitution. We actually have to prevent an out-of-control president, and yes, an out-of-control Supreme Court. And we can only do that if we follow the guide of our Constitution and our Declaration. And those liberty conservatives, they're concerned about their guns. They're concerned about their religious liberty. They're concerned about how their children are going to have an education that's crammed down from the federal education department called Common Core. Those liberty conservatives create such an added value to a well-articulated conservative candidate. You know, believe it or not, I remember the Ronald Reagan campaign. When I was young, I said Ronald Reagan, I should have said Barry Goldwater. I remember that too. And so my family was always involved in politics one way or another. And I used to say, my parents had 9 children, I used to say we didn't have dinner plates at our place that we had lecterns, because we were always debating politics. And so I've been thinking about these issues for a long time, even though I'm fairly new to politics. And one of the things that I've heard over and over again from my own party is, well, he's not our guy, but he's the least of two evils. You know, we have to just accept the fact, well, the best we could do was the John McCain or the Mitt Romney. It's the best we could do. It's better than the other guy or the other guy. It's the lesser of two evils. I've been hearing that for 40 years. You know what happens when for 40 years you vote for the lesser of two evils? You accumulate an awful lot of evil. The Republican Party and the conservatives in this state and this country have to begin to stand for what is good and not simply what is the lesser of two evils. And if we draw in those conservatives, those 4 different types of conservatives, we not only will have the Republican Party and Republican Party base, but we will have those conservative Democrats that are waiting to hear that from a candidate, and we will win elections overwhelmingly, and that's my goal, and that's my advice to the Ohio Liberty Council. So thanks so much for having me.
Coming after that speech is a perfect opportunity to make sure that you all know the members of the Republican Liberty Caucus will have a board that are here with us today. Running audio-visual is our public relations chair. Matt Erickson is here. We also have Kelly Sanders, who's our membership chair, and our secretary. You obviously have heard from Ann Becker, and the next 2 speakers are board members who I'll introduce here as well. Unfortunately, a couple other members of our board could not make it, but I know that they're participating online today, and hopefully we have a number of folks that are watching and listening, continuing to do so to the program. The reason why I wanted to introduce our board members today is to go right on board with what I know Matt Lynch was going to say. We have to stand for something, do we not? And the members of the board that I just introduced, I don't agree with absolutely everything that they espouse and that they hold dear. I don't agree with everything that you heard from the speakers that you hear today. I agree with what they said, but I don't necessarily agree with everything that they espouse every time, every way. But again, I introduced our board right now, coming on the heels of Matt Lynch's speech, because our coalition is strong and what we agreed on is far more than what we don't, and we need each other. And that's what the Republican Liberty Caucus is all about. So let's get to the heart of why we wanted to call this today. We wanted to introduce for you the Ohio Liberty Index, starting with the Ohio Legislator Liberty Index, and presenting that is our board member who is in charge of our legislative committee, and we got a very qualified person to lead that legislative committee. Mike Newberg is the Ohio Director of the Students for Concealed Carry, spends a lot of time at the State House advocating for Second Amendment rights. He is an active member of Ohioans for Concealed Carry, and he certainly has a lot of knowledge about the legislative process and how to track the legislation necessary. We're so glad to have him leading our committee. Please join me in welcoming Mike Newberg.
Thank you. And wow, I'd first like to start by saying thank you so much to this fantastic facility, beautiful facility, for hosting us here in Medina, Ohio. So everybody take a chance to meet the fine host today. We'd love to thank you for having us today. So my name is Mike Newberg, and of course, you know, I'm the legislative chair for the caucus, but I'm also the gun rights activist that Bill spoke about earlier, who stands with mothers and fathers for freedom of choice in education. As a candidate for the Ohio House in District 17 last year, I campaigned primarily on the right to school choice. And as Bill mentioned, as director of Ohio Students for Concealed Carry and an active member of Ohio's for Concealed Carry, I also work to restore the right that a law-abiding citizen has to carry a concealed handgun onto college campuses. In my role here as the Liberty Caucus of Ohio's Legislative Affairs Chair, I lead our committee in the identification, categorization, and tracking of bills and resolutions through the Ohio General Assembly. And I'm going to take the next few minutes to show you the index and to tell you what our goals for the index are. What you see before you is the index as you look from our website. Here, you see the members of each chamber ranked on two criteria: how they vote compared to positions that we've taken, and how they work to advance principles of liberty by introducing legislation. Their legislative score is a measure of how they vote compared to positions we've taken. Their sponsor score is a measure of the work they are doing to advance the principles of liberty by the legislation they've either introduced or co-sponsored from initial inception. And that's key, because a lot of legislators like to hop on bills that are going to be successful and towards the end of the passage of the bill. It's important for us to identify who jumps on board when it's not popular. Members awarded points for each vote in agreement with our position on a bill. For every vote in opposition, no points are awarded. Voting present, where a yes vote would advance an RLCOA's position, results in no credit. Whereas voting present where a no vote would advance an RLCOA's position results in the same credit as voting with the RLCOH. Being absent from a vote removes that position from the total tally of points of that legislator. Bills are categorized into three broad categories: a bill that restores personal liberty, a bill that reduces non-essential spending, and a bill that reduces the size and scope of government power. The number of points a member has is divided by the number of points they can obtain, and this is reflected as a percentage you see on their score. You also see a sponsor score to the right of the table. A member is awarded points for sponsoring the bill and for initial co-sponsor of the bill that either restores personal liberty, reduces non-essential spending, or reduces the size and scope of government's power. They are weighted the same as we weigh the votes. Their score is completely separate item is intended to be a tiebreaker and to help the general public decide where to put resources. The goal of our index is not only to afford the public the opportunity to make educated votes, but to make educated donations and support in volunteering campaigns. For example, Representative Tom Brinkman votes with us often enough to earn an 84 legislative score. He has also introduced enough legislation advancing the principles of liberty to earn a 21.5 sponsorship score. Representative John Becker, however, only has a voting score of 55, but he has a sponsor score of 31.5. This is intended to help you decide on where to put your resources, both volunteer, donations, and your votes. Clicking on a legislator shows you specific votes and introduced legislation that we use to obtain our scores. You can also see their positions on legislations of interest, as well as our positions on legislation. From there, you can read the bill and decide whether or not that particular piece of legislation weighs heavily enough with you to influence your support, and if so, how much. You'll also notice that Representative Steve Arndt has a voting score of 100%. This highlights the lack of index maturity. He's only been able to vote with us on one bill, and he got it right. If he had voted against us, he'd be at the very bottom at 0%. As we move forward and legislators provide the opportunity to vote and introduce legislation, this index will really start to flesh out those members who truly embrace the principles of liberty and liberal government. Even early on, we see superstars bidding to emerge with 2 members scoring above 80 and a 20 in the voting and sponsor score categories respectively. We're joined by one of them, Senator Chris Jordan, here today. The goal of our index is to help you, the voter, donor, and volunteer, make an informed decision on where you place your support. The team we put together has worked tirelessly over the last few weeks. To lay the database infrastructure, to populate the index with voting and sponsorship information for the 100 or so bills that we identify as of interest to us. We hope this index helps. We also hope that you will help us. There are hundreds of bills that we need to track. For our small group of volunteers, this task is quite large. We need more volunteers, helping us track legislation so we can deliver timely information on more legislation of interest. Please, consider taking advantage of the opportunity to join us today to not only help us, but to be part of that voice. Thank you for your time and attention. I'll be more than happy to answer questions at the next Q&A session.
Kind of there's a D at the top now. Did you notice that? As Mike says, we've got a lot more work to do as this session progresses and a lot more to populate here, and we need your help to do so. I promise to be done with the hard work of today's session at the top of the hour, so we have our last speaker introducing the second and final part of the Ohio Liberty Index. I'd like to introduce our board member, who is the candidate committee chair. Mark Setzer is Republican running for Congress in the 11th Congressional District. He ran in 2014 when he earned the National Republican Liberty Caucus endorsement. He is founder and director of Grow Shaker, which is a taxpayer advocacy group in Shaker Heights, which happens to be one of the highest tax districts, if not the highest tax district, right?
In the country.
In the country, perhaps, okay. And he was a founding member of the Republican Liberty Caucus nationally when it started in 1991, and is just now being able to participate in his home state's chapter. Please welcome Mark Setzer.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone. The reason we want to review Republican candidates from a liberty perspective is because even though we have a lot of elected Republicans in Ohio, our state government, taxes, and spending continue to grow, and our liberties and prosperity continue to suffer. So I think it's clear that we need better information about which Republicans will best protect our freedoms. Like our legislative liberty index that Mike Boomer just showed you, our candidate liberty index will be able to tell you who we don't recommend, who we do recommend, and who we actually endorse in every primary in the state house and senate. It's going to look a lot like what Mike set up. How we arrive at this evaluation will be a transparent, systematic process of liberty index scoring based on public voting records, if any, responses to our own candidate survey, if they responded at all, personal interviews, media reviews, and debates in key primaries where Ohio Liberty hangs in the balance. We don't have a candidate liberty index yet because the filing deadline for candidates isn't until next month, about December 16th. For now, we staged our index with city legislators. By early January, we will finalize our candidate list and reserve spaces for any debates that we want to hold. We will then mail out surveys, interview candidates where necessary, select debate moderators and questions as needed, and compile all our liberty scores. In early February, we will hold the debates and post our recommendations to voters by mid-month, just in time for the early voting in the March 15th Republican primary. All this means a lot of work for volunteer organization, and that's why we need your membership so that you can help. Whether you're present here or watching online, please join the RLC of Ohio and email my committee at candidatereview@rlcoh.org. Ohioans need your help to choose the best candidate for our personal and financial freedoms in our great state. Thank you.
So that is the heart of the program, and I'm sure you've got plenty of questions. There's an awful lot of work that went into this. I cannot say enough for this wonderful board that we've assembled, who, in short order, has pulled from scratch something that's not being done anywhere in Ohio, is unprecedented here, and in most states as well. Where are we going to go from here? There's an awful lot of work that's required on Mike's committee to vet legislation, the data entry that's necessary for all these votes, to track legislation from stem to stern, and understand where things are. We need the diversity of opinion within this broad coalition in our group, like-minded in liberty, diverse in perspective, to be able to populate that and make sure that we're providing the voters of the state of Ohio the information they need. Mark, who you just heard from, an incredible task, actually compiling the results from all of those surveys, deciding exactly how we're going to go forward, conducting endorsement interviews. My goodness, that's time consuming, as well as setting up and conducting potential debates amongst Republican candidates. An awful lot of work. More importantly, we want to take this in Ohio where other states have gone. We've only been in existence since June, but other states like the Republican Liberty Caucus of Florida and Texas and Washington, these organizations that have been around for far longer actually have regional affiliates where they vet and endorse local candidates for mayor, for city council, for county commissioner. We're going to try to do that at the state level, but we start off with our emphasis anyway at the legislature level because we're so new and we need your help. How about doing what Ann spoke to? Perhaps we become the Republican arm of the precinct organizing project, trying to seed the bench strength in the Republican Party through central committees. Maybe that's the direction we go. How about a much needed direction that's in Ohio with regards to judicial candidates? Man, that confuses me. I know it confuses the lay voter. Maybe we need to be a resource for that information for vetting judicial candidates. Guess what? This all takes a lot of work and needs a lot of help from you. Right now, today, we hope that you'll go to rlcoh.org and just click the join button. By doing so, you'll go to a screen where you'll have an opportunity to join the organization. Yes, it costs money because this is a complete volunteer organization with no paid staff. Typically, it's a $45 membership fee. Through tomorrow night, it's only $30. We've decreased it to try and encourage, as a result of folks watching this presentation, to get involved. We need you to get involved. If you're here in Medina, there's also a sign-up sheet over here that says, yes, I plan to join, and here's how I think I can help. Here's my email address and phone number. info@rlcoh.org goes to the good Mr. Erickson down here, who will be able to take your inquiry, and if you've got skills and talents you want to lend to the effort, he'll make sure that it gets to the right committee. We need your help. We hope that you'll consider joining us. With that, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break to reset the stage here. Thanks to Mark Williams and Williams on the Lake here at Medina, they have provided some refreshments at the back. We're going to take just 5 minutes, and then we're going to bring everyone up here who has spoken here today. If you have questions about the index, if you have questions about Mr. Lynch's congressional campaign or legislation that is being considered in the Senate from Mr. Jordan, we certainly hope that you will get those questions ready, and then we will take advantage of that. Also, on rlcoh.org, if you are watching us, there is an option if you're actually on the event page for this and not just watching us from the home page, to actually click and ask questions via the web as well. You can start those questions flowing now if you've got them, and then we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we're back. Out of the spirit of complete transparency, we wanted to open up to questions. Both folks participating online at rlcoh.org. There's an opportunity for you to hit a button that if you have a Google account, that a box will pop up, and you can do that. If for some reason you don't have a Google account, our Facebook page is being monitored as well. And there's an opportunity to ask questions of the folks here in the audience in the dynamics. So with that, hopefully we've already got them flowing, and Matt is going to run double duty in addition to his audio-visual responsibilities. We'll field your questions here in the audience. He's got the mic there and is roaming the hallways. So
we're gonna try to do this. Okay, so our first question is actually going to come from Kelly Sanders, our membership chair, as well as secretary of the RLCOH. Kelly, what is your question?
My question is that it's what comes up in common conversation around people that are considering membership with our organization, and they're also active in the Republican Party, is that they are concerned, or they voice concern of the impact that our organization will have within the party. Is our goal to damage the party or cause disunity or hurt sitting legislatures and that kind of thing? So that is a common concern among fellow Republicans, and they would like to have that question addressed.
I think it's a great question. I'll start with this one out of the gate if anyone else wants to chime in. I think it's incredibly important to understand that we are Republicans. We are unabashed Republicans. As I said at the very beginning, we are very, very pleased to be working with a number of different liberty groups around the state because they're allies in our cause. Their work at laying the groundwork in education is phenomenal, but they are explicitly nonpartisan. We're explicitly partisan. So how crazy would it be if we wanted to see the Republican Party not succeed? Of course we want to see the Republican Party succeed. We want to build up the values within the Republican Party the right way by adhering and rewarding those folks who adhere to those values. So by all means, we do not want disunity within the party. We're not going to tear down any Republican candidate, but we sure as hell are going to prop up those candidates that are doing the right things, making the right decisions, and furthering the cause of liberty in Ohio.
Yep. So that's a great question. And when I decided to run for the Ohio House in District 17, I was actually torn whether or not I wanted to run as a Libertarian or as a Republican. And I had a conversation with Julie Borowski. And Julie talked to me about restoring the Republican Party from the inside and bringing us back to our founding principles. I decided that my work would be best served in doing that. And being great senators like Chris Jordan and other legislators like Matt Lynch, I learned there was a lot of us on the inside that were trying to bring the party back to its founding principles. And we had an early conversation when developing the legislative scorecard on rewarding and punishing members. And right away, we decided that we didn't want to punish people. Instead, what we want to do is we want to hold people up that are performing well and that are advancing liberty, and not punish folks that aren't doing that. So we don't do negative scoring, except in the introducing the bills. You don't get a negative voting score
You just get a voting story. People can see how you vote for this and how you don't.
Matt?
Yes, thank you so much. It's a great question, one that actually I hear quite a bit when you run against an incumbent Republican, as I am, in Ohio's 14th district. Certainly are faced with that issue about, well, are you really a Republican or not? I was at an event just this week, and someone asked me, well, what is a Republican anymore? And, you know, and I hadn't been asked that before, and I didn't really think about that, because there's a range of Republican thought, I guess we could say. And I also have wrestled with the question of, well, should I be a Republican? And the answer, of course, is, for me, yes. Because, and I've said this many times, you know, I'm a Christian conservative Republican. The reason I'm a Republican is because the Republican Party supports those values of the conservative and of the Christian. So it's a fit for me. It is a dilemma, it's a challenge that we have Republicans that perhaps don't want to adhere to those values. And that's why we are Republicans, because I'm interested in saving the Republican Party. You know, we talk a lot about Abraham Lincoln. You know, Abraham Lincoln, he was the first Republican president. And he was only the second nominee for president of the Republican Party. And that's because the Whig Party was around. I don't want the Republican Party to go the way of the Whigs, all right? I want the Republican Party to be the dominant political party in the 21st century, and that's why I am.
Thanks, Matt. Next question, Mr. Erickson.
So we have an online question from Grand Fan 2016. Says, would you identify your state rep and senator and comment briefly on their score and whether you feel that it accurately is represented, and if not, what you're doing to fix that?
So, want to jump in? I don't know. Let's start here at the end.
My state rep is Margie Condon. I'm in Southwest Ohio. And Margie is one of the nicest women I've ever met in my life. And we've had a lot of conversations about what I would love to see from her. And I tell her all the time, I'm looking for a table pounder. I'm looking for someone who will say, this is what we need to do it now. And that's just not her nature. So her score was fine, but introducing bills and that kind of stuff, she didn't really have any of the bills she introduced. But my state senator, I didn't love to see what my state senator's rank was. So he wasn't on the top page when you put it up. So Bill Coley is my state senator, and Bill and I fight about Common Core at least once a month. He's the chairman of the Education Committee, I think, isn't he? Bill Coley. Well, Bill does a lot of education. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. So, but yeah, and I will, a lot of times when I get calls about, well, what do you think of this person? What do you think of this person? This tool will be amazing to be able to say, well, what's their score? What do you think about your state rep score? So I'm really excited to point this tool to a lot of people and help them to really evaluate what their state rep and state senator are doing and what they will do in the future.
So I'm very fortunate to have as representative in the Senate, Senator Chris Jordan. So I don't think I need to talk anything else.
You want to talk about your rep?
Well, he tends to be on the I guess, more conservative part of the Republican caucus, which I think represents our district well, represents, I believe, his core values well. You know, and I think the rankings will hopefully start shaking things out better when there's a wider sample of votes that have been taken. Then you can really see the break and the difference in true liberty-minded legislators and people that just made one bad vote or didn't see something in a bill that they didn't know. You know, because a lot of times, you know, bills become Christmas trees, and we have a single vote rule. Yeah, it's not always followed. It's not always followed strictly the single vote rule or a single subject rule. But you know, because there's 2 or 3 really good things in the bill and 1 or 2 really bad things in the bill. And my natural tendency is to vote no on the bad stuff, because when I knock on doors around my district, I talk to a lot of people. I hit at least 10,000 doors a year. And I don't have a lot of people saying, I need more rules to follow. Please tell me I need more laws. I don't know what to do, and I need the government to tell me what to do. So I don't have any of those folks. I have people saying, just leave me alone. Get out of my way, get out of my wallet. We need you out of the way of my small business. We don't need more rules on texting while driving, doing this and that, because I know how to live my life. So that's my just natural tendency, is just to vote no on things if I see anything bad.
Senator Kevin Bacon and Representative Ann Gonzalez for me, and I'll echo what's been said with regards to we have half of a single session of votes that are loaded, and so there's much more shakeout to come. That said, I think they're sitting about where I expected.
Yeah, I could really get in trouble here. So my state representative is Sarah Lantoret, who is the daughter of Steve Lantoret. So if you can judge for yourself how you evaluate her. I don't know what her grade is. Yeah. My state senator is Senator John Eklund. He and I, when I was in the State House, we actually had a video debate over Medicaid expansion. I was opposed to Medicaid expansion, so I'll let you evaluate that as well. You know, it's tough for legislators, though, I will say, and for those of us that have been in the legislature, there is tremendous pressure to vote at any given night, in a given way, and that's why these ratings are really important, because the folks that you can count on are the folks that stand up to that pressure.
To tell you how bad this is, I'm from Shaker Heights, Ohio. It's a very, very liberal district around Cleveland, inner suburb. I don't even know who our representatives are. I know that they're Democrats. Lance Mason, Matt's helping me out, and we're looking this up as we go. And I can't see him on the index. Lance Mason is a Democrat. I don't know who my senator is. But let me tell you something about Democrats. You know, I've lived in this district for 25 years. I used to be a long-haired hippie, believe it or not, but I was always for freedom. I thought liberal meant freedom. Imagine that, you know. And people think, yeah, this guy's a real liberal guy. And I'm like, well, what does liberal mean? It means liberty, I thought. Unfortunately, people get different ideas, and but the Democrats are actually, that I know, my neighbors, my friends, black, white, they're actually very conservative. They're personally very conservative, and they're just not, they just always voted Democrat. So this is what I think the liberty, this fourth stool that Matt talked about, is giving the energy to the Republican Party, because most people are conservative, they don't know it. So if we're going to win elections, we've got to bring Democrats, independents, and I think this is what the Liberty Movement and the Liberty Caucus can do. So, you know, that's how, because I don't pay attention, the Democrats, we got to change that, and I hope this group can do that. Next up.
Any questions?
Is the national organization or the Ohio organization making any attempt to, for lack of a better term, infiltrate the college campuses?
That's a great question. The national organization partners quite a bit with groups like Young Americans for Liberty, Students for Liberty, things of that nature, who are already very much in tune with the values of the Republican Liberty Caucus. I'm not aware of a specific Republican Liberty Caucus branded effort to do that. I think if you wanted to join and influence our decision as to that being one of our priorities here in the state of Ohio, I think that would be fantastic. You only have to look as far as what's been going on in college campuses, whether they be Missouri or Yale or what have you, and understand that there is a complete dearth of understanding of how this country was founded, the values upon which this country was created, let alone how it is that we succeed going forward. And there are great student organizations that exist already. Maybe that becomes one of our priorities. Does anyone else happen to know if there's other organizations that?
Actually, I can speak to that a little bit. So as a veteran on U.S. submarines, I went back to college at Ohio State University. I graduated in May 2014. One of my classmates was Niraj Anthony, who's a freshman representative right now out of the Dayton area. And I can tell you that what you're seeing on the news is not an accurate representation of the pulse of college students today. They're playing more to the collectivist idea, the media is, because they want us to think that's what young people want. That is not what young people want. Young people want to be left alone. And there's a lot of young people on college campuses that are primed and ready for this kind of thing. So that's why we need help. We don't, that's not a focus for us right now, as Bill said, but it can be. And it should be.
Unfortunately, the other side's getting on the media. I don't know how.
That's exactly what
Thanks for the question. Next up.
Yeah, John McAvoy, thank you gentlemen very much, ladies. This is a powerful tool. We've been waiting for something like this in the state of Ohio for years. I'm glad to see the Republican Liberty Caucus stepped up and did this. Congratulations. You guys, I think this is going to be emulated in the other 49 states. If it is, it should be. This is a very labor and time intensive task that is being undertaken. I do not envy you, and I understand what the problems and how you're going to approach a solution. What can we do to help with this? As in, I know this is labor intensive, I know this is time intensive, and this is probably financially intensive. What can we do out here in the Liberty Group and the conservative movement to help make sure this tool endures?
Two things. First of all, we'd love for you, and I sound like a broken record, join so that you can help actually lift the load. If you don't have that time or inclination, or this is not your cup of tea, but you, as far as being a member and helping in this regard, but you see the value that's being prescribed, hopefully you were involved in your central committee, or a local Liberty group, or a local Republican club. We would really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to those groups, and perhaps you can be our liaison to those groups by bringing them to our attention if you feel that they're primed and ready for this message. John, I know you well enough to know that you know the speaking circuit when it comes to conveying the importance of tools and how tools can be of assistance because of the work you've done with Ohio Conservatives United. This is something that we would like to actually emulate a lot of the great things that you've done, which is connecting with those already established Liberty groups that already exist. There are a lot of Republican clubs that exist that don't necessarily join forces with Liberty groups. I'm amazed at how many Republican clubs and Liberty groups, and they don't necessarily work together, but they're in the same community. A group like the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio hopes to change that. And tools such as this will kind of bridge the gap between, the Ohio Liberty Coalition type groups and Republican clubs and the young Republican organizations and the Republican women's clubs that exist throughout the state. I think this is a way in which we can continue to coalition build. Like I said at the beginning, the Leave Us Alone coalition needs to work with each other. I think this tool can bring those together. Other thoughts?
Actually.
Yeah.
So the Liberty Index helps not only decide where to place your votes, but also where to place your support, both monetarily and with volunteering. Right? I ran for office. I know what it takes to knock $10,000. It takes a lot, and I did that myself personally as well. But it also helps out when you have eager volunteers out spreading your message. And so we can help that from steering you in the right direction and helping you make an educated decision on where to invest your volunteer hours, your volunteer time with the legislators. And at the same time, what we do is you demonstrate to that legislator, hey, I got your information, I found out about you through the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio. And they helped me understand that you best represented my views in the General Assembly, so I'm here to volunteer. Well, that adds credibility to us. So that's another way you can help out, not just directly here, but also helping your legislators.
Bill, let me.
Yes.
What we saw with the index that we saw, the legislator index, we want to do the exact same thing for candidates. We have this kind of setup, we put in a lot of work for that. So if you have volunteer hours, you don't have money, we just need volunteer hours to set this up over the next couple of months because we can do that in advance of the March primary. So So that's going to be a big project just to get that up. So if you're thinking about volunteer, think about the candidate review committee.
Mark's the slave driver, just so you know.
Next up,
We have another online question from Libertarian. It says, does the national RLC have a similar ranking system for federal legislators, and have they endorsed Matt Lynch yet?
have they endorsed it?
Yes, how about that?
We were talking about that earlier, as a matter of fact. We need to make sure that, and that's one of the roles of a state chapter that we haven't had in Ohio until now. Our Ohio charter is restricted and prohibited from endorsing federal candidates. As you can imagine, when it comes to who we want to send to Congress, there needs to be ensure that we're speaking with one voice. That doesn't mean we don't play a role. Our role is to make sure that the national organization is aware that Matt Lynch exists. Because you think it's hard on a state basis to do what it is that Mark and Mike have been talking about. Imagine trying to do that on a national basis, again, with an all-volunteer, no paid staff organization. So, is there such a tool? From time to time, they have published a lot. They certainly issue endorsements at the federal level, and they vet candidates very thoroughly. Senator Ted Cruz was a former endorsee. Senator Rand Paul, a former endorsee. They don't hand out endorsements willy-nilly. Matter of fact, they hand out actually very few. So it is a very, very laborious process that they go through, and a lot of candidates don't want to go through it. I think Matt can come through with shiny colors.
We're gonna work on that for sure.
Okay. Good question.
Yeah, Dennis Trudovich. Just to follow up on what you said, it's not necessarily a national rating of federal offices, senator, or representative. How about just an index on the state? The Ohio, the people we send to Congress in Ohio and our senators.
So in other words, it would be a same ranking like you saw here for state legislators, but a ranking for just Ohio's delegation is what you're talking about. So it's something certainly worth considering. You have to talk to our national folks to make sure that they're down with that, but I think it's a great idea.
You're not endorsing anybody.
Right.
You're just giving them a rating.
You're giving them, that's something very much worth considering. I think it's a very good idea.
Maybe I should chair that committee.
I wonder who would want to. Okay. No, that's a fabulous idea. I think that's something I need to take back. Thank you.
Good afternoon. No mic, I stand up. I've been active since 2009 from Tea Party. We have a road group that I'm one of the leaders with, the Ohio Second Amendment Group. Wadsworth Conservative Coalition. I support them and my fan. The crowd here today, and I'm sure I'm pretty blunt at times, so please forgive me if I won't insult on purpose, but to me, the comments on, Ohio State's playing, 3/4 of the people here are the choir, and just 25% of us are citizens. I found out about this because Matt Lynch's website said he was speaking. I knew nothing about the Liberty Caucus. I thought I was trying to support his campaign and him, even though I'm in Summit County and not in his district per se. But the miscommunication among the groups seems vast. The Concerned Veterans for America, they're focused on one thing. Liberty Caucus is focused on another. It's like the NRA. We're a single issue. Well, you can't focus on the Second Amendment if you don't focus on the First, and Third, and Fourth, and Fifth, and Sixth, and so on. So my question is, how do you start communicating and coordinating? There's got to be some core. The Democrats got it down. They've got it down. We had issue 1, which was statewide in Summit County, and I helped, get all the signatures, we had a countywide, reform, issue on the ballot. And it went down because Democrats came to every single precinct and stood right outside the 100-foot line with the big multicolored placards saying, vote no on issue 3, vote no on issue 3. They got it down. How do we get, we got to get the coordination. And,
Well, I echo the question, so what do you think, guys? How do we do that?
So I wouldn't mind chiming in on this one if you don't mind.
Matt?
So, Bill Romer is the one who was running the Summit County issue, and I'm good friends with Bill. I'll tell you, one of the issues that we have is that we have morals. I think we can't come at the issue the way that Democrats might come at an issue because they're more willing to bend, and we're not. On the communication standpoint, I completely agree with you. And part of my mission as the public relations chair for the Republican Liberty Caucus is to make sure that while we're not viewed as a one-issue organization, we are a one-issue organization. That one issue is liberty in the state of Ohio. So that's my goal, is to push that forward. Working with groups that support the First Amendment and support the Second Amendment, and making sure that all of those pieces are taken into account. And I think in the legislative scorecard, when you look at the bills that are being scored, they're not one-issue items. There's some of them that are personal property rights. There's some of them that are free speech rights. There's some of them that are, there's a number of things that we're looking at in that as well. So I think that from my perspective, it's a matter of making sure that we have that communication, not only with the voters, but within our own ranks, and making sure that everybody understands what we're here to do, and making sure that we can all mobilize and actually get that word out, so that the voters know what we're here to do as well.
Chris?
I would just say by nature, conservatives and liberty-minded folks just want to be left alone. So we're not motivated because we're trying to lobby the legislature to get a big contract or money or some new government program. We just want to be left alone. So I guess by nature, we just are constantly pushing back, but we kind of get frustrated and stop doing it. So that's part of it. And I have to say that tyranny is much more organized than liberty. But when the brush fires of liberty start catching on, and they oftentimes don't catch on until things get really ugly. But when the brush fires of liberty catch on, they're going to be a lot tougher to put out. We've got a lot of people around the state that think the way that we do, but they're just too busy going to work. They're too busy trying to earn a living for their family and keep the government out of the way. So it's just difficult.
Great question. If you figure it out, let me know.
well, the thing is like he said, people are too busy. I was too busy too, going to work every day, coming home, having dinner, and sitting in my easy chair, relaxing in front of the tube. And a certain radio show, like a lot of other people in 2009, woke people up and saying, the job isn't done. You gotta get off your easy chair. I'm ready for retirement right now, and yet I gotta do battle with my government, which is gonna be the rest of my life.
And the folks can't hear on the web what's being said, but we're just hearing a fantastic speech. It's a shame we can't. With regards to just, we gotta get off our duff. We've got to get moving. And thank you for coming out here today, because hearing that voice motivates us in our mission and what it is we're trying to accomplish. So thank you for saying that. Matt?
So we have another online question here. Since most bills that get floor votes have already been watered down, is the RLC of Ohio tracking amendments or anything like that?
To the chair.
Actually, yes. So we not only track the bill in its entirety and its final vote, but we also track its progress through the committees and being amended. So what you'll notice eventually as the index matures is that we track votes on versions of the bill. So if you sit on a committee where a bill gets altered a lot, you vote on it, and we change your position based on the amendment of the bill, and you vote the wrong way, there's a good chance you could get credit and no credit for the same bill, right? So yes, we do track that kind of stuff in the index. We'll flesh those kinds of things out as it matures. And that's also important to understand why we track co-sponsorship from inception. Because a lot of legislators, as I've learned, being active in the process, like to hop on a bill when it becomes popular and when they are certain they can win. So they can say, I championed this bill, I championed this thing, but they weren't there from the beginning. So that's what the sponsorship score is intended to reflect, right? Because they only get credit for initial co-sponsorship.
Couple more?
Hi, I'm the president of the 912 Project in Menor, which is up in Lake County. And our group is a member of the Ohio Liberty Coalition, which is where I learned of the Republican Liberty Caucus of Ohio, so it's really exciting. There is actually a lot of really exciting organizing that is happening in the state of Ohio with Ohio Rising, the Ohio Precinct Project. We have 3 liberty groups in Lake County. Lake County is the smallest geographic county in Ohio, but we have one of the largest populations. And our groups are all very, very active, going door to door, doing the legwork. We have a lot of volunteers. In fact, they're planning a literature drop for our candidates for the 2016 primary coming up. And I was thinking recently, so I'm glad I have the opportunity to ask this question. This goes to the PR question. I was wishing that the Ohio Precinct Project, Ohio Rising, Republican Liberty Caucus, etc., would have some kind of literature piece designed and available for download on your website, because though your funding resources are limited right now, the individual groups maybe could get $1,000 together, and download and print. I don't know what's going on. Sorry. And have them printed on our own to distribute. We can include them with the literature drop that we're already doing, and there might be groups around the state also willing to do something like that.
You got that, Matt?
That's
Matt's Matt's takeaway.
National does exactly that. National has on their website charter resources. We can go and you can pull up pamphlets or brochures or anything like that, print them off yourself, and we're going to do the same thing. So.
Also, we got Mr. Lynchip. I just want to make mention that that very articulate question came from Kim Laurie, who is running for county commissioner in Lake County, one of the Liberty Group's leaders in Lake County. And we're hopeful that this second time around is going to be successful for her. And I also want to comment on your question. I so appreciate you being here about how do we get the word out, or why do people come out, why do people get involved. It takes articulate spokespeople like sitting at this table, and many of you here in this audience, to motivate folks to get out. We recently saw the Republican leadership in Congress decide they wanted to clean out the barn. You heard that phrase, right? Because they didn't want to have to talk about and argue about any issues for the next couple of years. This is exactly the wrong approach. Because if we do not have these arguments, win or lose, I want to win, obviously, but if we don't articulate these arguments, we cannot motivate people to come to the problem, to address the issue. I've said for many, many years, knowledge is a burden. How many of you remember the radio program or the TV show or the night I threw my shoe at Bill O'Reilly and my wife said, get off the couch and do something about it, the moment when you realize, hey, this is, the wolf is at the door. And it's our job to carry that message to our neighbors so that they are motivated to come to events like this and support great candidates like Kim Laurie and so many others across the state.
And Kim, real quick, Kim is a good example. She came at the Ohio Liberty Coalition meeting that took place in Marysville and said, how do do I get endorsed by the Republican Liberty Caucus? And what's great, we need folks to make sure that we are not just vetting legislative candidates, but that we've got enough manpower to find the bench strength in Kim Warren and be able to support her. My goodness, imagine if we were vetting every candidate at that level across the entire state. We can't do it with just the folks that you see up here and the few others that have already joined the organization. So please join. How about one more?
And that's a perfect segue into my question, because that's exactly what I was going to ask. How far down ticket are you going to go, and are you willing to go? And what resources can we assist with, or what resources do you think you will need to go down ticket?
We basically need volunteers at this point. I mean, suppose if we got a bunch of money, we could hire people, hire moderators and interviewers, but generally I think volunteers who've got the firebrand of liberty are best. So at least getting the candidate index going within the next couple of months, in time for this primary, which is coming up, is a volunteer hour type job, and that's what we're looking for right now.
All right. Well, with that, folks,
If I can expand on that real quick, go ahead. As far as how far down ticket do we want to go, we'll go down to township dog catcher. I mean, if we have the resources available to be able to vet everything that is out there to be elected, we're willing to vet anything that's out there to be elected. Time and money and manpower. Those are the three things that we need.
we got to build bench strength. And the bench strength starts at city council, township trustee, and central committee. More importantly, thank you, Ann. So yeah, that's extremely important. It just takes a lot of resources. So we will vet every Republican Ohio legislative candidate. Everybody else, if they want our endorsement, we need help identifying who they are that need our support. Hopefully they'll come forward, but we may need to find them because they may not have been aware of this event. And then, of course, then we need the manpower because, wow, what a heck of an effort that Mark has ahead of him to weed through everything coming in through email and snail mail to vet through it and figure out who's going to interview this person, who's going to set up the appointments, who's going, oh my goodness, there's this wonderful Republican primary that's taking place in such and such county. Who's going to go out there and rent the space or find the location or get with the candidates and figure out what the debate format's going to be. And my goodness, this is going to take a lot of time, so please join. We good? I tell you what, let's go ahead and for those folks here in Medina, for those folks who can stick around, I know Matt's got something coming up. I know that Chris has got a long drive back, some of others have a long drive as well. We'll stick around for as long as there are questions of us offline. For those participating online, thank you so very much. Yes, I'm sounding like a used car salesman, but we hope that you'll go out to rlcoh.org today, especially through tomorrow night when you can save $15 by joining this weekend. We decided that, yeah, even though we really need the money also because it costs money to actually send out mailers with the postage, etc., and to maintain a post office box to retrieve them, etc., that it's much more worth it at this stage of the game to get members. So please join us, rlcoh.org, and you can just click join. We appreciate that. Thank you so much for participating. Thanks again to Mark and Allie Williams on the Lake. Fantastic facility here. We cannot thank you enough for being such gracious hosts. And we hope to see you very soon at another RLC Ohio meeting. Thanks.